Hello, everybody. My name is Graham Elwood, and you're watching The Political Vigilante. I'm joined by returning guest, friend of the show, Whitney Webb. And Whitney, I wanted to talk to you about, and let me see if I can bring this up, this article you just did on Unlimited Hangout, which is your website. And I want to just share this on the screen so the audience can see it, because it's what you found is pretty alarming, but sadly, I'm not surprised. I mean, it's alarming, but it's like, it's not a surprise. So I just want to share this. So military bases housing migrant children plagued by serial sexual abuse claims. And this just came out a couple days ago on your website, Unlimited Hangout, which I urge people to go join and support your work, because as we were just talking, Patreon basically censored you, kicked you, or you chose to leave because they were like, oh, just take down all your articles and censor yourself, and we're going to still take your audience's money. So I urge everybody to go to Unlimited Hangout and support what Whitney is doing. So Whitney, go into detail, basically what you've uncovered,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So a lot of people may have forgotten already because, it hasn't really been talked about that much. I mean, they have done reports on it, but it doesn't come up frequently anymore. And so they've let people forget about it. Anyway, in mainstream news, they talked about how children or minors that are in what they call migrant overflow facilities or whatever, a spin word they have on that.
A nice name, facility.
Yeah, well, now there are facilities, tent cities, basically, that have been set up on 3 military bases. One of them is the most recent one was announced in California, but the initial announcement was for 2 bases in Texas, which is Fort Bliss and Joint Base San Antonio. Joint Base San Antonio has the highest rate of reported sexual assaults out of any joint base operated by the entire Department of Defense in the US or abroad, according to a Pentagon study. So that's the Pentagon itself, that's straight from the horse's mouth. In 2014, for example, only around 3,000 out of 26,000 cases of sexual assault in the military were reported. So it's drastically underreported. So in a 3-year period, this particular base had almost 900 reports filed about sexual assault. And given how excessively underreported those assaults are, it was probably in the several thousand at that particular base. In that 3-year period. And now, these kids have been basically set up in tents at these 2 Texas bases and at Camp Roberts. And in the case of the Texas bases, soldiers aren't even allowed to photograph where these minors are living. Media have not been. No details have yet to be released of the military base, and we don't know exactly how many kids are there. This was being done by the HHS's Office of Refugee Resettlement. These negotiations with these military bases, they currently have about 13,000 minors in their custody. The other ones, there's a couple other thousand that are that are being held by Customs Border Protection also. So anyway, these military bases. And not just Joint Base San Antonio, but also Fort Bliss. I mean, Fort Bliss is really crazy if you actually look at just the recent incidents in the past year that have happened there. And it's really abundantly clear that the Fort Bliss leadership are super shady when it comes to sex crimes. In one example, there was a woman, female soldier named Asia Graham, that was sexually assaulted. And then a year later, almost a year to the day of her sexual assault, she was found dead. But Fort Bliss never released the cause of death for this woman. And only recently her rapist was arrested, but they just left it there. And in the case of another guy, Fort Bliss refused to confront a serial rapist on the base. And it wasn't until he was moved to a different base in New Jersey and raped his own daughter on base that he was actually legal action was taken against him. And the whole time he was Fort Bliss, they did nothing. He raped numerous women, including the wives of soldiers that were under his charge. And in the case of one of the wives, her case was actually investigated. A lot of the other ones were not. And in her case, the criminal investigative division of the Army found evidence that her rape, that it had actually happened, and recommended that prosecution takes place. Fort Bliss did not prosecute. And according to this lady, told her that's just how it was on the base, this guy. And he didn't just rape women, he cut women with broken bottles and all of this stuff. And this is the leadership of this base that is now holding thousands of kids who were super vulnerable, saying that type of stuff is just how it is at Fort Bliss. And that is totally insane that this is happening under the most progressive administration, the new FDR administration, all of this stuff. I mean, this is sick. And, if you're saying that, oh, well, it's not as bad as it was under Trump, you're not paying attention. There were talks actually during the Trump administration of doing this military base thing. It didn't go this far. And it didn't go to bases like this. And also, these two bases are also excessively polluted, have had major groundwater contamination with cancer-causing chemicals, and a lot of other issues. But that's really common in military bases, for them to be excessively polluted just because of the types of chemicals the military deals with. It's pretty common, actually. But the one in California that was approved is actually an active Environmental Protection Agency Superfund site. Which means it's one of the most contaminated places in the entire country. And the entire base is classified as one. And these kids are living outside in tents. On Camp Roberts in California, soldiers that work there frequently report seeing raw sewage bubble up from the ground. There's around several hundred abandoned buildings on the property from the World War II era full of asbestos and lead. There are signs warning that there are mice infestations, and that the rodents are or rats, rodents, and that there's a high risk of Hantavirus, which is an airborne, often deadly virus, and it spreads outside by breathing in the air, and these kids are in tents there. I mean, it's nuts. It's nuts. And what's weird is that it seems like Biden's whole policy here, according to even mainstream media, is just to move the minors from the Customs Border Protections facilities, I guess, because those are most controversial, and move them to other types of facilities. But the facilities they're moving them to legally are not required to be held to any sort of regulation or standard of care that is required of other centers operated by the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And there's attorneys that have visited some of these new types of centers that are in this category, and said they don't even know if there's any rules governing what sort of standards, living standards, have to exist at these bases where these minors are. I mean, it's insane. It's insane.
And this is why, I mean, you're seeing how those that are really running the show actually were probably not fans of Trump, and not that Trump was this hero for the working people. Trump was pretty awful. He was just the most vulgar version of what presidents have been doing for a long time. And he would talk about it too openly. And that's where they're like, no, because they want everybody back to brunch. They want everybody not having time to protest in the streets or take direct action, or they don't want people showing up at town halls. They want everybody to think, oh, Biden, Kamala, and the squad, they've got it. It's all better now. Hey, they're not perfect, but they're doing. No, and it's like, this is what was so maddening.
Yeah, give them time, they're saying. Well, what's crazy about that is, like, a bunch of these kids, according to these attorneys that have visited, every kid they talked to had contact information for their family, and they wanted to go be with their family, and they weren't even allowed to call their family in some cases once, like twice a week. And their main concern, when they were talking to these attorneys, they were telling these attorneys their main concern was just stuff like, my family's probably worried about me. I need to let them know I'm alive and stuff. They're not even allowed to talk to them that frequently. But shouldn't they be? If the crisis is so bad and there's so many kids, and the kids know where their families are, why aren't they being released to the families? In a lot of cases, they're not being released to families. They're being released to sponsors that are supposed to undergo extreme careful background checks, all done by a case manager. But it was recently reported by mainstream media, CBS News, that most of these kids haven't even seen case managers, and these attorneys, every kid they spoke to hadn't spoken to a single case manager. So the problem isn't being addressed. I mean, if you wanted to start resolving the problem, the kids that know where their families are, you send them with their family, whether their family is located in the U.S. or their home country or whatever. If the goal is not to have all these vulnerable kids that are unaccompanied with no adults to look out for them in these super overcrowded facilities where awful stuff is happening. The governor of Texas came out recently, I think just a day or two after I put out this article, saying one of the facilities that are in this category, not a military base, but another one, because they're also like former oil rig worker camps and former mining camps and stuff are being like refitted to house kids too, right? At one of these facilities in San Antonio, just a really high rate of sexual abuse claims, kids claiming that they were being sexually abused by workers there. And there have actually been convictions in Arizona. One guy was going around molesting little boys while they slept and stuff like that, and was allowed to work there for a really long time. And he was HIV positive. I mean, it's just like, they're not vetting anything, and it's almost like they're doing it on purpose. And I say that because if you actually like look into this type of stuff about what happens to kids, whether it's Epstein or something else, the U.S. military, out of all the internet service providers in the world, the network of the Department of Defense consistently ranks in the top 5 of internet service providers that host the most child porn. Why is that? It's the military's network.
Really?
Yeah, this isn't CNN. I mean, this is not like, oh, where'd you get that? Q? No, this is actually, there was a bipartisan legislation effort to curb the use of the prevalence of child porn on Department of Defense computers, because there were actually like a bunch of officials caught up in a DHS sting for child porn. I think it was as many as 500 Pentagon officials at the time, and it just totally swept under the rug. So, if you're going to have that type of no accountability, and you're going to have so many kids and they know where their families are and they're not, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a wild situation to really think about. I don't even know if I can fully wrap my head around it, but it's a mess. But this is also part of what happens when you have not only this president, but the previous president. They're both rapists. So, I mean, it's not like they're really going to care about sexual abuse.
No, and this is what's so maddening is they're both rapists. And, this is the problem I have with, so obviously the MAGA people are crazy, but the blue MAGA people in some ways I think are worse, because they're all like, me too, believe all women, but Tara Reade, maybe not so much. Like that kind of shit drives me absolutely insane. And they're like, well, give Biden time. Biden time for what? To clean up the cages that were built under Obama when he was vice president, when they deported 3 million people? Is that there's always this, that's the thing about this stupid two-party system. I mean, it's stupid by design, is that there's always this, well, we got to clean up the mess of the last guy. No, it's all been
It's
awful.
Actually the same policy, and they keep following it and advancing the same agenda. They're not cleaning up after the next guy, and they're picking up where they left off. I mean, that's how it's consistently been. I mean, look at Obama and the baton toss from George W. Bush. Citigroup chose his cabinet. I mean, that seems pretty consistent with the Goldman Sachs banker that was Secretary of the Treasury under Bush being like, bail out the banks or martial law to Congress, and then Obama has Citigroup choose his cabinet. I mean, these guys all work for the same people, and a lot of times they're, bankers, oligarchs,
And so, but I want to you've obviously uncovered a lot of all this awful stuff that is happening to these kids who are being put in cages that were built under the Obama administration.
Yeah.
That people on the left only got mad at when Trump put kids in cages. And obviously there's this, I didn't know that about the military servers have like the number one.
Yeah. Well, it's in the top 5. They won't say which one it is. But I mean, that's an insane statistic, because I mean, you're thinking about a military network. It's not like a bunch of like people that you would think in your head, the stereotype of a person that would be into that, and would they use the military computer for that? It's like, why is there so much on there? And also, why will Amazon Web Services and not get rid of all the child porn on its servers? Apparently, it's been targeted by a bunch of advocate groups because it continues to host this stuff, and it knows it's there, and they won't take it down. Will the Washington Post report on this? No.
It's weird. They won't report on that. And I know there's software that can recognize it, because a friend of mine was a cop for 24 years. And his last 10 years, I think, on the force, maybe longer, he was a child crimes investigator. And now he works for a company that they make software that recognizes child pornography, so investigators aren't exposed to having to look at all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So I know the software's out there that Amazon could just implement to go, recognize it and immediately delete it. They could just do that, but they don't. Why don't they want to do that? Which begs the question, since you've done so much work.
Amazon Web Services is where the intelligence agencies, all of their data is held. I would say that might be a likely culprit after, Epstein, Franklin scandal, and all of these other instances of their involvement and things like that. So,
well, this is my next question here, since that's obviously good information to know. So Amazon, we know, works hand in glove. When the CIA paid Jeff Bezos $600 million to host their servers, that's when that's how that happens. And that's why the Washington Post is always pushing State Department talking points. And in the extensive work that you've done about Epstein and the intelligence community, you've come on this show and enlightened myself, and I feel like I'm fairly knowledgeable about Epstein. But I always feel like a dilettante when I'm talking to you when it comes to this, because your knowledge base is you're so thorough, Whitney. It's why I love having you on the show.
Well, thank you.
in light of all the research that you've done about Epstein, especially since we're going on 2 years now, almost 2 years since he was arrested, and all the uncovering of the deep state, the people like Les Wexner, and now you're talking about the military knowing that kids are being abused. Is there any evidence to suggest that these are hubs for trafficking?
Well, we know that as a result of this crisis and these kids being in these facilities, and this effort to release some so that more can be housed in these facilities, and have there have been documented instances reported in mainstream media of human trafficking taking place, and a lot of it is actually to have these minors being taken to places where they have to work without pay and stuff like that. They're slaves, basically. This happened, for instance, one case I can remember off the top of my head involved kids being released to a sponsor, and it turned out the sponsor wasn't really vetted, and he basically took all these minors to this egg farm in Ohio, and they had to work there until it was found out. But how many times does that not get found out? Because it's actually government policy to only make one follow-up call once these kids are released. So who knows what happens to them after that initial phone call's made a month after they're sent away with a sponsor. And actually, in some cases, they end up, when they make the follow-up call, it turns out they're not with the sponsor anymore. They're with a non-sponsor, and that's apparently fine with someone that has no relation to them, no background check. So there are a lot of holes for kids to fall through here. And what's really alarming to me is that the huge volume of kids makes it really easy for some to just slip through the cracks. And the fact that there have been documented sexual predators working at these facilities, they're sending them to, in the case of Camp Roberts, like squalid places, intense. They're not even buildings. And people can't even photograph what's going on there. And also under the Biden administration, they even tried to keep mainstream media out of the custom border protections facilities for like several months. They don't want people seeing what's going on there in a way that I don't think happened under the previous administrations where this was a policy. Those all seem like huge red flags to me. The fact that it's happened, how often does it happen? We can't really say, but clearly the way they're responding to the situation is not going to fix any of the problems that are allowing those types of cases to happen. It's probably actually increasing the ease of a bad actor to take advantage of kids in this system. And in some cases, parents weren't even notified their kids were in some of these facilities. And it wasn't until someone saw the kids and sort of knew the parents or something that they were able to notify them their children were being held. And then they started calling the government, asking the kids to be released to them, and they don't get an answer. And also, I forgot this, in 2018, HHS publicly admitted that they lost track of 1,500 kids that year. And that's what they admit to. It could be more. I don't know. So it's apparently supposed to reach like one of the highest levels ever of these minors crossing the US-Mexico border this year. How many will they lose? I don't know. I mean, no one's really paying attention because they're so good at distracting us with other stuff and not covering things that actually matter in mainstream media half the time, you know?
Yeah, and then you've got AOC going, look, it's not good what's happening, but it's not as bad as under Trump. Trump ripped babies, out of mom's hands. And it's like, that's a blatant lie. Under the Obama administrations, there's all these reportings, official documents. I show them on this show of people reporting crimes, assault, sexual assault, abuse under the Obama administration. All these things were reported. So like, it's just, and that's the other thing. AOC just, makes it okay and allows the any blue will do crowd to sleep at night with their delusions that Biden and the Democrats are somehow better but I want to go back to the
really quick. It's not just that the Obama administration made these policies. They made this crisis because most of the people coming for both adults and minors, a lot of them for years, most of them for years, have been from Honduras. And Honduras was couped by the Hillary Clinton State Department in 2009 under Obama. And the regime that the U.S. has backed there ever since is driving these people out because it's a horrendous dictatorship. And it's installed and backed by the U.S. government just recently. And it's no coincidence the border crisis has surged since then.
Of course, it's all of our coups and sanctions and war that creates all of these crises. And
they know this. I want to make that clear. They know this. And they knew this crisis would happen as a result of that.
I would argue that it's probably deliberate because we know through the Epstein stuff that one of the ways that Virginia Roberts Giuffre and Maria Farmer said he would joke about, oh, I'm buying up poor kids and their families will just give me money. So they want kids that have no record, that have no home.
They do. And speaking of Maria Farmer, she talked about how there were a bunch of maids from the Philippines in Epstein's residences. And one of them told her that she had been stolen. It's a direct quote, stolen. So where did they come from? So Epstein wasn't just involved in sex trafficking and the trafficking of minors. He was also labor trafficking. And it seems like, at least from the cases that have been reported, most of the trafficking, when it does happen to these kids that are caught up on the border, they end up being trafficked for labor as undocumented workers taken and just, basically treated like slaves.
Of course. And, anywhere there's a Clinton involved, there's got to be something awful happening.
Yeah. Well, someone told me, I really hope people in the chat maybe can let me know if they've seen this too. But someone who I have a lot of confidence in was telling me that Laura Silsby, the Clinton affiliate that got caught trying to traffic kids out of Haiti after the earthquake, apparently works for a company that contracts to the Amber Alert system now. How the fuck is that okay? That is so insane.
But that tells you, look, it's insane. But also, if you get into their horrific mentality, so their mentality is, how can we legally snatch these kids up? How can we create crises to snatch these kids up and look like we're the good guys? That's the Clinton Foundation. Oh, it's helping people. It's like, this Ghislaine Maxwell had some Save the Ocean Foundation that was educating 14-year-olds on ocean safety. Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
And so, and again, what the Clinton Foundation did in Haiti, has been documented. And so it seems like in the same way that like Les Wexner and, Epstein would use modeling to traffic and go to, 13-year-old, 14-year-old girls. Oh, hey, you want to be a famous model? Well, and they would snatch them up that way. These same folks are using the border crisis. I mean, if you're a predator and you're not going to get monitored, you're going to get a job with border security, just like you're going to, or with, the Boy Scouts or the Catholic Church or whatever. And not to say everyone in those organizations is a pedophile that's trafficking kids, but if you're a predator, again, my friend who was a child crimes investigator would always say this: you can't go fishing in a parking lot. He goes, so when we had suspected a predator, they always had some job or something that was around kids and access to kids. Jerry Sandusky had this like disadvantaged youth. And again, what my child crimes investigator friend said, he goes, you show me 100 kids that were abused, 99 of them came from disadvantaged homes, or there weren't two parents, or they didn't have a lot of money and they were easily taken advantage of. And that's what predators look for, because a kid that grows up with two nice parents that are paying attention, that kid's not going to be in some facility. They're not going to, you know what I mean? They're less likely to be abused. I mean, they still can be, but so what does the predator want? The predator wants easy prey.
Yeah. And on that note, most of the organizations that claim to be in support of children that are at risk or abused children are not what they seem. Save the Children, the organization, was founded by Oxfam, which is like affiliated with the UK government, of their workers doing food for sex scandals, refusing to give food aid to families unless they could have sex with their teenage daughters and stuff like that. It's extremely prevalent in groups like this. And a lot of these groups like Save the Children, you know who one of their main fundraisers was in 1985? Who hosted a big Save the Children gala? It was Ghislaine Maxwell.
Ugh.
What do you know? That seems normal to have someone like that, who, by the way, all of that child trafficking stuff in that network, even if the official blackmail operation with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell didn't start until 1991, back in the 80s, that was totally going on in that same network. They were all involved in a part in. And I mean, it's a mess. But I mean, that's just one example. That Oxfam report found that numerous charities that claim to protect refugees, that get tons of money, millions of dollars a year in donations from people thinking it's going to help kids, that their workers are doing this. And there's been no accountability, none, whether in these organizations or from different governments that have investigated this, found there to be proof of it. They just, it comes out in the media, it makes a little blip, and then it goes away. Another example, the U.S.'s National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is run, since it was created, is run by a guy called Ernie Allen. And they are one of the main forces involved with the whole Amber Alert system. And Ernie Allen, before he was put in charge of the center, and by the way, the international version of that Center for Missing and Exploited Children was later basically launched by Hillary Clinton herself and the wife of Tony Blair. So clearly, if you're having these people back your, Save the Exploited Children organization, it's a little suspect. But especially in the case of putting Ernie Allen in charge, right before he started leading these organizations, he was involved. He was sent to Belgium to advise the government of Belgium about how to respond to the Dutroux affair, as it's called. And basically, it was this electrician, Marc Dutroux, who kidnapped women, locked them up, chained them up in his basement, and it was frequented by the richest, most elite people in Belgium, including politicians. It was basically like the Epstein for Belgium in the late 90s. This guy was sent there to advise the government about how to respond, and things like the top law enforcement guy that was supposed to investigate that and didn't investigate anything, never looked at the tapes, refused to investigate reports of girls' screams coming from the house and all of this stuff. With Ernie Allen's advice, he gets promoted to police commissioner and stuff like that. And so that's the guy that still is running this running these organizations. He might have stepped down in recent years. Actually, I'll have to go back and look, but if so, it was really recently, and he's still really influential in these circuits. Like, for example, he's on the board of the Ashton Kutcher fight online child abuse NGO that is really shady. I actually came on and talked about it before. He's on the board of that group.
Jesus.
But I mean, it's nuts. So this is supposed to be what's supposed to, protect children. The system that's there, like Amber Alerts and stuff. I mean, if they don't want a certain group or a certain kid to be found, they just don't put out an Amber Alert. If you're a bad person with access to that system. I mean, and the fact that like this Silsby lady is like at a company affiliated with that system is just like, if you put the traffickers, the criminals in charge of the thing that's supposed to regulate that crime, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, this is how everything is run. I mean, cops investigate themselves.
It's
Who
true.
investigates Wall Street? Wall Street investigates, or politicians that are paid by Wall Street investigate it. Who investigates the military? Oh, the military investigates the military. So
the CIA investigates itself. It's always like that, isn't it? And they always find no wrongdoing. It's really convenient. And people are fine with that. They're like, oh, well, the investigation happened, but some people actually think there were legit official investigations of thing where actually there was no official investigation. So for example, the 9/11 Commission, both the chair and vice chair of the 9/11 Commission say that they were lied to directly by Pentagon officials, by intelligence officials, that the report that they issued can't answer fundamental questions, essential questions about the nature of the attack, and that it's not a complete investigation. And that's straight from the horse's mouth as you can get, right? But people assume that it's been, investigated. It was investigated and whatever. And now the guy that was in charge of, with all the conflicts of interest, that was put in charge of the 9/11 Commission or overseeing it after they couldn't get Henry Kissinger approved for it, is now going to come in for Biden and assess COVID policy. So that's comforting. And by comforting, I mean not comforting.
So, of course. So
yeah.
With regard to this, what's happening at the border, Whitney, as you see this, what can people who are like watching this show, what can they do? How can we help stop this? I mean, or change it, or what? I don't know. It feels very overwhelming, but what can we do?
Well, I think starting off with the military-based thing is a good point, because I think a lot of people don't even know that there's kids being housed on these military bases there, as an example. Most people think they're going to these overflow facilities, or they're at CBP facilities and all of this stuff. The situation is really similar to like it was under Trump. And I think people, maybe it's because they all went back to brunch anyway. A lot of people are unaware of how things have changed in just a few months. And I think it's really important to raise awareness about that, specifically among the groups that cared about it under Trump, because some of the people, specifically the politicians, are hacks, and we're doing that for political gain. But I think a lot of the people, grassroots wise, that were outraged by that then would be outraged if they knew how things were now. And so, I think that, those people are really important to reach with that stuff, because if you can generate the same sort of outcry about that and put pressure on it, it can have an effect. So basically there was recently there was some report, I forget what outlet did it, that came out that showed that one of the facilities that the Biden administration had opened was awful. And then out of shame, because of the media report, they closed the facility 2 weeks later. So, they do respond to pressure about some of this stuff. Because there's a reason they're trying to keep the media out, and it's because they're afraid. But there is information coming out. That's how I was able to put this report together. But I think it's really important to raise awareness. But unfortunately, people's interest is elsewhere. Some of it on things that are kind of, I would argue not as critical as this. But the media is really good at distracting us with things. Like in the case of the UK, they infinite Prince Philip dying coverage, and there's no other news happening apparently. Mainstream media in the US does that sort of stuff too. They'll find like some sort of story that they can just uses filler to avoid reporting real news. Because the mainstream media doesn't just like, there are instances where they deliberately put out false stories and stuff like that, but a lot of it is just lying through omission by ignoring or not covering stories.
Yep, that's what they do. Yeah, Prince Philip was like, who cares? Why do I care about some British royal? Why do I care about
racist loser? How about that? And
the royal family that has all this history of pedophiles and sex trafficking. What Prince Andrew? Where's
who's trying to rehabilitate his image now? Apparently, he's like hired people to help his comeback. Whatever. Oh my God. I mean, if people in the UK stand for that, that'll be really unfortunate. I mean, you can't let that dude rehabilitate himself. He's gross.
Yeah.
All the people with Epstein are gross. And well, that's my opinion, but it's not like a very journalistic statement. Sorry about that. But, as an example, so like Biden, and I think we've talked about this before, there's going to be a confirmation hearing soon for Eric Lander, who is going to be Biden's top science advisor and is going to be elevated to a cabinet level position. So he's on par with Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, all of those guys. And he was funded and photographed meeting with Epstein and praising some eugenicist guy in 2018. And the people that criticized the crud out of him for praising the eugenicist guy in 2018 now say it's fine that he's in the Biden administration because the person working directly underneath him is an African-American woman. So that totally absolves him of praising a guy who said that people of African descent have genetically inferior intelligence. It's fine. It's fine. So, I fully expect, because no one wants to talk about that story, despite it being documented. It's there. The Epstein pictures there. The Jeffrey Epstein VI Foundation promoting on its website that it's funding Eric Lander's research and all of this stuff. Mainstream media has been uninterested, despite the Epstein scandal, and connecting this guy who's going to be the top science advisor to I believe the science and follow the science, Joe Biden, is going to be an Epstein scientist. And Epstein, I mean, I doubt that at his confirmation hearing, anyone will even ask him about the Epstein ties, despite it being obviously in the public interest. And if it comes out, the dude won't be confirmed, I hope it does, because is it really going to be a nation governed by Epstein science? Are people actually going to that's fine. I just don't understand. Plus, the other thing about Eric Lander is that he runs something called the Broad Institute, which is basically MIT, Harvard, and Silicon Valley coming to steal and use your health data for their own ends. And Eric Schmidt is on the board of it, among other Silicon Valley figures. So, it's good.
Oh man, all this diversity in the Biden cabinet is just too much to handle. All this diversity, all this wonderful. It's just the diversity of the ruling class and diversity of Epstein people and the diversity of the war machine and the diversity of big pharma and the diversity of Wall Street. It's so great. Oh my God. Yeah, Joe Biden is a horrible piece of shit. So is everyone in his fucked up cabinet, and they can all go fuck themselves.
I agree. You said it. Yeah.
They can all
high five.
Yeah, high five all around. I'm not a journalist. I'm a comedian, so I don't give a shit. They're all gross.
Yeah, you get to say more stuff like that. Yeah,
their soulless, maggot-ridden, diseased vermin, and there's a special place in hell for them. But enough of that. Whitney, thank you so much for taking. I know it's getting late where you're at. We have over 1,000 people watching. Please hit the like button, subscribe, tune in, do all this. So where can people follow your work? I know you're on Rockfin. It's another great reason, folks, to join Rockfin, because for $10 a month, that's the other thing. For Patreon, you had to support Whitney's Patreon, my Patreon, Jimmy Dore, all these people individually. Now, if you support Rockfin's premium, you get Whitney's premium, my premium, Ron Placone, everybody. Jimmy Dore, Lee Camp.
Abby Martin's on there.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And some other people. So
yeah,
it's definitely worth checking out. Mm-hmm.
Where can people follow you?
Okay, well, since you gave Rockfin a big plug, I won't mention that. If you're on Telegram, which I actually recommend, because you can also, there's like a chat for people tied to Unlimited Hangout, but also like a channel that's sort of like a news feed that you can follow specific to my work and my website. So even if I publish somewhere else, like The Last American Vagabond, where I also contribute, you can find all my stuff posted directly there in case I get booted off of Twitter, because who knows how long I'll be there. But you can also follow me on Twitter for now at _ Whitney Webb. And like I said earlier, if you don't want to sign up for Rockfin but want to support my work, you can go to unlimitedhangout.com, go to the Support Us tab, and you can either join that. We offered more payment options than Patreon actually offers. So if you don't want to pay in regular currency, for example, you can get access to that Patreon equivalent with Bitcoin, or you can pay via PayPal or, the usual stuff, credit card, whatever. So for those that are interested, I really appreciate it, because it, allows me to continue doing what I do after Patreon tried to really pull the rug out under for me. And I'm sure Patreon will continue to do this to other people. It's really unfortunate that they're doing that, because, people want to support different content creators. I don't understand why they think they can get in the middle, but they've done so. So, you're trusting them with your stuff, with your money at your own risk, because what happens if they, in the case of The Last American Vagabond, they also got deplatformed off of Patreon before I did, but they did it right at a time where things had just paid out, and then they suspended the page. So Ryan from there couldn't access the money that patrons had paid out to him. Ooh. So yeah, risky.
I mean, look, Richard Medhurst said he got kicked off of PayPal. Like they're just gonna try to stick it to us financially, however they can, to get us to shut up. That's what they're gonna.
Yeah, because the other censorship hasn't worked, because I think even though censorship is increasing, trust in mainstream media continues to crater. People are going to gravitate towards truth or truthful content despite censorship efforts. Even if you censor all critical thinking and independent thought and only leave like one flavor of news out there, people are gonna, even if it takes them longer to find, they're gonna go out and look for something different because it's not content that's appealing to them. So, censorship can only take them so far. They're trying to go after our income, and that is really not good.
Yeah. So support what Whitney's doing, everybody, so that she can keep bringing stories like she just brought to us today. So Whitney.
Well, really quick, if I can, before we wrap up about the Patreon thing, there are a lot of smaller channels that are still dependent on Patreon and haven't had, maybe you're supporting me and you were supporting some other channels and you decide to get off the platform. Please make sure you follow up with those smaller channels and see the other ways you can support them that aren't Patreon, because I feel really bad that if you're you were a patron of mine, for example, or you're watching this and you want to get off of Patreon, there are some good content creators out of there that have sort of, that have lost a decent amount of their monthly income from Patreon because people have been boycotting the platform because of this new censorship policy. So make sure you think about them so they don't get left behind too.
Yeah, that's a great point. As I tell people, if you're going to cancel my Patreon, I totally get it. I'm not mad at you at all, but just please support me some other way. Venmo, PayPal, or I prefer Rockfin is the best one. So thank you, Whitney, for making that point. We'll really appreciate you taking time to come on the show. I know it's late there, and it's okay. We love having you on the show. We'll have whenever you want. You just
Thanks.
You just let me know when you're on the show and we'll make it happen.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, thanks for the open invitation. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you letting me on to talk about this stuff. And, give my spiel to your audience, I guess. But I really would encourage people to try and follow my work on Unlimited Hangout. You can sign up to a mailing list or other ways. And same, I don't know if you have alternatives to, Twitter and Facebook Gram, but definitely recommend you set up something, because they're going to come for that next. If they don't do it sooner, they'll do it later,
They will. Yeah, I'm working on that. I'm doing Panquake and other stuff. I'm waiting for other stuff to happen. So everyone's aware. Everyone has the same feeling, like we need to create our own thing that they can't screw up. So people are hungry for it, because everyone knows they're being lied to. one way or another. Everybody knows they're being lied to one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really a matter of disagreeing about the scales of the lies, I think, at the end of the day, or who's telling the lies. If you only think one side is lying to you, you've been had.
Yes. Without a doubt. Yeah. Without a doubt. Well, Whitney, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon. And everybody check out Unlimited Hangout.
Thanks.
All right. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Whitney Webb, everybody. Isn't it awesome? Don't you just, I just feel so, when she comes on the show, man, it's so extensive what she does. That's why it's like, please follow her, please support her. Cause she goes so extensive on all this stuff. It's so fantastic. And she makes these connections. She connects the dots. It's just like, whoa. And it always makes perfect sense. What do I say on the show? Follow the money, connect the dots, get the truth. That's it. Follow the money, connect the dots, find the truth. There it is. That's all she does. That's all she does. She just goes deep, and she's a real journalist. She's out there digging deep. So thanks for watching, everybody. Please hit the like button, the subscribe button. Go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood and rockfin.com/Graham Elwood, where you can support the show. Also, I have a Bitcoin wallet, a Bitcoin Cash wallet, and an Ethereum wallet in the show notes. We're taking cryptocurrency. I have a Coinbase affiliation link. We're going to be getting on some other exchanges. So that's how you support the show. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. YouTube is unsubscribing us at an alarming rate. I have a PayPal button at grahamelwood.com. I even have a Venmo at Graham-Elwood. There's a lot of ways to support our show. We are getting crushed by YouTube. We've dipped under 73,000 subscribers because of YouTube. Thanks for supporting what we do.